Welcome, everybody, to the Resilient Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, Haywood Shum, who is the founder and CEO of BINERY. Welcome, Haywood.
Thanks, Neil.
Thanks a lot for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate it. So maybe we'll just kind of kick it off with like a quick introduction for yourself. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm Haywood Shum, and born and raised in Hong Kong.
Don't sound like it. Well, I don't know how. It's pretty amazing how
people say I have an American accent, but I went to a British school, but I never picked up the British accent.
Right.
And for some reason, I don't know, it was just like too many American sitcoms growing up or what it is.
Right. What was your favorite when you were growing up?
Movie-wise, probably American Pie series.
Okay. Yeah. But typical teenager.
They can't make those anymore.
They can't make those. It would not be shown.
Born and raised in Hong Kong.
Right.
And I went to university here.
Right. Yes. You never, right. So yeah, your English is just, well, that's kind of like a little,
it doesn't match the voice I've heard.
Exactly. That's wild.
Yeah. And I'm done. Just really happy to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your startup, BINERY. So
sure.
Yeah.
So BINERY, I'm not an accountant, and somehow we're doing this startup which is focusing on the problem of bookkeeping.
Right.
And bookkeeping as a problem is felt by many businesses around the world, no matter how small or big you are.
Sure.
And currently, I would say BINERY is a bookkeeping firm.
Yeah.
But what makes us different is we have many software engineers, as many as we do accountants.
Right.
So we're like, okay, our thesis is we want to automate bookkeeping.
Right.
But for a lot of, let's just say, non-digital native businesses, it's impossible at the moment. So human intelligence is required. But also,
to the extent to set the rules, to the extent to kind of set the structure, or
to the extent that the technology cannot automate at this point. And some things, I believe, at this point should not be automated yet.
Okay.
And so we see a kind of symbiotic relationship between, what should we program as features, and then what should be kept as a service.
Right.
And that's been like the pillars of how we started the company. But to the end customer, and we see a lot of SMEs being our direct customers, they don't really care whether it's technology or no technology. They just want the outcome.
They just want the output. They just want all right, I just reported my taxes, or I already have my, bookkeeping done and everything like that. Like the admin side, right?
Correct.
Right.
So we're like, okay, this is a monthly subscription. Just sign up to it. But the interesting thing is, we got to compare ourselves, like what makes us different to traditional bookkeeping firms.
Right.
And the essence is we see that traditional bookkeeping firms or traditional accounting firms have different finance functions that they offer.
Sure.
Accounting, tax, corpsec,
yep,
and bookkeeping. And bookkeeping is the least sought after revenue model.
Why?
For the accounting firms, because it's low margin.
It's low margin and it's heavy labor.
Yes, correct.
Right. So high cost and yeah.
Correct.
Right.
But actually, the data play is in the bookkeeping aspect. It's just during the production of the management accounts and the audits, a lot of data is just kept offline, and the accounting firms just move on.
Right.
So we're like, okay, and how do accounting firms charge the traditional ones? By number of transactions.
Right.
So we're like, hey, there are high volume transactional businesses out there who have, probably lower transaction values, and they need bookkeeping help. And that's how we kind of found our customer personas and started from there.
Right. That is wild. Ultimately, I think folks are just trying to get that sort of off their plate and have somebody to manage the entire thing, right? They're not going to go out and hire necessarily, or they could hire an external bookkeeper, but then even that person has a fair amount of cost, right?
Correct. So it's about how to leverage technology to carry the cost savings over to the customer, as well as a bit of like KYC and accuracy through the whole process.
Right. And so what are let's say from a timeline perspective, from a cost perspective, how much are people saving in terms of using your service versus, let's say, traditional bookkeeping?
Sure. So I wouldn't say we're the cheapest if you're comparing purely based on
Of
cost.
course, never say that.
You can
I would
go on
never say
the
that,
gig
right?
economy
Yeah,
platforms, right?
right,
You can hire some talent for $5 American an hour,
right,
very remotely.
right.
And essentially, I think we compare us the baseline to traditional services if they
Sure,
use the kind of whole like how many number of transactions to charge the customer, then
sure.
we would typically be 30 to 40% cheaper,
Less, right, right,
less
right.
or less.
It,
And in that sense, it's because we charge based on your monthly revenue instead of your number of transactions.
oh, you charge on the revenue.
Yes,
I
correct.
see, I see.
So we've seen two models. Some charge more newer models is basically charging your revenue or charging your expenses.
Right,
And there's no one size fit all.
right.
If you're a consulting company with a $10 million invoice, you don't really need a bookkeeper in
No,
that
you don't.
sense.
Right,
So it fits a particular persona in the market.
right, right. So yeah, it's either transaction value or a total size of the business. That's how you kind of look at it.
Correct.
And then, I guess there's different cutoffs or things like that that kind of switch it over to one or the other, right? And
Correct.
what other service? I mean, it's just pure play bookkeeping, or are you looking to extend beyond that? Like, because of course you're using a lot of AI, right? I mean, maybe you can talk a little bit about the AI portion of your business.
Sure. So this was before GPT 3.5 or GPT 4 came out.
Right.
And at the very beginning, we built our own model.
Oh,
So the whole
wow.
so the whole
Okay.
fine tuning
Right.
process, the supervisory learning
Right.
was built into it,
Right.
purely from scratch from Python. We
Wow.
wrote this, and then right now it's deployed on Google Cloud,
Right.
and we're using. Let me get this right. Google's product called Vertex AI.
Vertex.
Yes, and
Okay.
that's basically a platform that allows us to scale the model as we
Mm,
grow.
right.
But the reality that we got to face and embrace is when OpenAI came out with, X billion parameters, X trillion parameter with those models, there's no way to compete.
No.
And they can do OCR extraction, like
Right.
data extraction is
Sure.
what I mean, way like 10,000 times better than ours.
Right.
So that's where we started off, data extraction, because our customers had a lot of offline invoices and
Sure.
need extract.
Right.
So as we kind of evolved, we embraced this reality, implemented GPT into our platform.
Oh,
But
you
we,
have implemented GPT. Right.
yes,
Right.
for
Okay.
specific use cases.
Right.
For example, chart of accounts categorization of
Mm,
that line item, for example.
right.
But we still had all our locally ingested data with our own model. So how do they complement each other?
Right.
And I think that's our use of AI till now.
Mm,
And obviously, what we did is a data extraction platform, and we built a lot of workflows on top.
mm,
As I mentioned earlier, I think our customers don't really care about you know, the weaves of the software too much because it's not purely self-service.
right.
The actual customer that benefits from the software is actually the accountant or bookkeeper.
Right.
So,
So really, it's like a B2B to C type model that you're operating.
yes, you can say so.
Right.
You can
Right.
treat it like a Monday.com for bookkeepers,
Right.
like a
Got it.
workflow management practice
Right. Right.
software
Right.
for bookkeepers
Very
to
cool.
save their time.
Right.
So, our acquisition channel actually was direct to SMEs, and later it
Mm,
became through accounting firms
I
because it
see. I see.
makes
So you
their
were going direct to SMEs, and then you're like, you know what, this is not gonna, or maybe it's not as effective, right, as far as approach to
yeah.
or your go-to market strategy. Then you said, okay, let's just the accountants because they're the natural funnel, if you will, for all those SMEs, right?
Sure.
Yeah, right, right. Got it. That's cool. So then, I mean, how have you progressed? I mean, we were talking earlier. I mean, you guys had
Yeah.
just like a lot of other folks. I mean, ups and downs inside of the journey as far as the business is concerned and things like that. So maybe
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that.
I don't think it's been. We're not in the best time right now for the business, let alone the whole macro situation.
Right.
And
Well, I mean, how did you arrive in this space, anyways? I mean, I forgot to ask you about that because I mean, because your background actually has not, like you said right at the beginning, is like you don't have any accounting background per se, and ultimately that wasn't even the area that you focused in on your career at the
sure.
outset, right? So how did you actually like discover this or end up in this entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah. Okay. Going back to square one. Okay. So the story is, I was in a a telecoms job for 10 years, enterprise sales.
10 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right.
And that was like
Same firm.
same firm, same
Wow.
firm,
Right.
same
Right.
firm.
Right.
It was
Right.
called BT, British Telecom.
Right. So
And
so you were like hyper conservative. Like you weren't like jumping,
no, 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 no,
doing
no,
different things
no,
and all that
no,
stuff right at
no.
that
It was
time.
a great company, a
Yeah.
lot of good people,
Sure.
and it's a very opposite end of the spectrum. I'm a
Right.
sales guy. Those deals might take 1 or 2 years, RFPs, big size,
Mm.
multi-year outsourcing contracts, and then in there I met my co-founder Calvin,
Okay.
who was my first customer when he worked in an airline,
He was
and
your first customer, like for binary?
no, for BT.
Oh,
I
BT.
sold
Got it.
into
Got it.
him,
Okay. Got it.
and then he moved to a global accounting firm to become the CTO.
Okay.
And he tried digital transformation inside. It didn't work out too well.
Yeah.
So I always see each other with skill sets as complementary.
Right.
And we just kept in touch to be like, hey, should we try it out as a startup mode?
Right. Right.
And then during that time, we just did some research, what's happening in the US, which
Mm.
startups in the same space are getting funded. And we just decided to give it a shot. So yeah, it was during COVID. 1 year of doing this as like a side hustle and then just went all in.
Oh, so basically you just cut and run after like a year, like 2021 or something like
Yes,
this. Right.
correct.
Right. Right.
Correct.
Wow. And he also did the same thing.
Yes, correct.
Wow. But you already had pre-existing clients and things like that inside of
For
that.
clients, like
Right.
because it's not about getting more clients. I think it's more about, man, do I really want to convict to this?
Yeah.
Like go full on.
Right.
Yeah.
And what was the trigger event for you to say, I'm all in? Like, you're, you know.
Hey, it's nothing to do with, oh, we see these signals here, right? It's
Right.
pretty much about to be 30, no kids yet, and
I like it.
what the
And so
hell?
it's a lot of personal,
Yeah.
less professional
Yeah.
type. Right. Right.
Correct.
Because you could always double back and say, you know what, I'll just go back to a corporate job, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not that far for you, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
And
right,
it's a different learning curve. It's like, what the hell? Why not?
right,
Like, what's the most that can happen?
right.
And so it was like,
And then you're like, oh my god, a lot has
yeah,
happened.
exactly.
It's like, oh, what the hell did I get into? But yeah, so cool. I mean, so how has it been? I mean, going back to that. So.
Yeah. I mean,
Started out fantastic. I mean, like what? Yeah,
no, I mean, there's so many ups and downs, and I think as of recent, there's been more downs than ups, but it makes the ups a lot more appreciative.
Sure.
And I'll give a few examples. It's only after a few years when you've ran a startup, like acquired customers, do the fundraising, you start reflecting on like, hey, could I have done it better as a team or
Right.
individually? And I think one thing that did not set us up for more success is I was fundraising all the time, like raising money every few months,
Sure.
instead of like, hey, you know what? Let's like these 3 months FOMO, put your check in,
Yeah.
and I have 36-month runway to grow the team.
Deliver, right?
Yeah, so-
Execute and deliver.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was once we made that choice of like, hey, every few months, it just it just hurt us
Right.
as a company.
Right.
And imagine like hiring someone, you got to let them go, 3-4 months later.
Yeah.
Just because of a cash flow issue.
Right. Right.
So, and we also embarked on a lot of experiments. I think Andreessen Horowitz said this, every single funding stage you do, it's like de-risking something. And we just went like, hey, we haven't even done one thing too well yet. We're embarking too many other things.
Oh, so you actually started to expand the product set, or even geographic or coverage. Right?
Yeah.
And it's just like
Specific
not-
example, right? Like we have one product, which is the bookkeeping thing, as a service or as a pure software to accountants. And then people start saying, hey, the data is valuable. What can you do with that as a data play? And who values the data? And I would say a lot of institutional commercial lenders, let's talk about some of the credit scoring side. Let's talk about some of the data ingestion. How can we clean it up? And that's great. It's just I think at our size of the company at that time, it might be better for a later stage where fundraising is required to be sensible in that conversation.
Yeah.
So I think it's the balancing between long-term and short-term projects, and that's one of the things that I've really learned.
Yeah.
As a
I mean, I think
founder.
the last time that we were talking, it was like, yeah, exactly. There was there's a lot of interest in using that type of data, trying to determine if there was what the usability was for what types of use cases when you do like credit scoring or lending and things like that for specifically for SMEs. But then you basically reverted back to the core because, whether it was because, you just wanted to double down or whether you had to, I
Yes.
think that's just kind of part and parcel of the market conditions, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I think those things take longer to materialize.
Yeah.
It can also always be part of the vision, but it's just that your ambition, I believe, should be way more focused on one thing at our seed stage size
Right.
instead of a multi-venture
Right.
approach.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can use that as your equity story, right? I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, it's just like, this is like, next year or maybe 2 years down the road that you're going to create this credit decision engine or whatever off of this type of data to address certain SMEs and things like that, right? So,
yeah.
what segments of SMEs do you serve most, or I mean, how
Um,
do you kind of break it down?
yes, I kind of break it down into three industries. One is digital native companies who would want to work with more digital native bookkeepers.
Right.
So from pre-revenue to Series B.
Pre-revenue to Series B,
Yeah.
right?
So at around
So the
Series B,
pre-revenue guys are like, do they pay you or they give you like shares?
that's yeah.
He's like,
I
I'm sure have they. I'm sure some of them like, you know what, Haywood, I don't have the money today. Can I give you like?
no, we've seen a few of those agreements here
Right,
and there,
right,
and I
right.
think, and more importantly, it's just getting them the right shape of the books to do the fundraise.
Right, right,
And usually, I think it's more about like just cultivating those relationships at the start. Because
right,
for us, the pre-revenue customers are very much brand building
right.
for us in
I
that
see, I
way.
see. Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
And then as we move up the ladder to the Series B, it's usually the companies before the ERP levels.
Okay.
So before the ERP levels, but they still need the financial controller. They're starting to hire a CFO. But for more, I would say, manual labor on the bookkeeping side, they would utilize us.
Mm,
So it becomes like a hybrid model.
right,
It's like we'll never know their internal culture better than the CFO.
right.
And but bookkeeping is quite homogeneous.
Sure.
So we're like, hey, can we work as a hybrid?
Wow.
So
Okay.
that's for the digital native companies.
Right.
And then we go to more of the e-commerce guys
Okay.
as a
Right.
second branch, and
Right.
then F&B, food and beverage.
Okay. Right.
So the common nature is high volume of
Yep.
transactions amongst these two industries. And I think if I have to choose who need us the most, probably be F&B.
Will be
Yes,
FMB.
will be
Right.
F&B. Because on the POS side, they're super well automated, but it's the trough of data on the supplier invoices side,
Oh, right,
which
right.
is still very offline.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, they're just like, here, sign this thing. Like, they show up
Yeah.
and then they deliver the stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the vendors are not, I mean, in some ways, you have to go all the way down to the entire supply chain to automate those people, but there's nobody that's going to do that, right?
Exactly.
It's going to
It's
be very difficult.
very,
Yeah,
very, very.
right,
I think that's more, without the um, unit economics hat on.
yeah,
Like when you ask the fundamental question of who loves this the most,
right,
I would say it's an F&B bunch. But
right,
is it scalable and how much education needs to be put into it? Way too much.
right.
So
So
it's like
it's a little bit challenging, but I mean, it's an interesting problem set, though, right? So, I mean, what's been the experience, I guess, in terms of you were talking a little bit about fundraising and things like that, and
yeah.
what's been the journey on that front, like as far as fundraising is concerned, because you basically bootstrapped from the very beginning, and then had a number of different discussions and things like that,
Sure.
right? Yeah,
Um, we bootstrapped for the first 1 year and a half,
yeah,
and then we're like, let's give this a shot.
right,
So what we didn't come from a VC background or another
mm,
startup, so it was pure cold emailing at the start
right,
and a bit of Google search, submit your pitch deck and
yeah,
all that kind of stuff. So the thing is, as I said, we didn't really gather a bunch of pipeline and then execute it in a 3 months thing. So every 3, 4 months, or 6 months, it's been like finding a new investor.
sure,
And I think that to our detriment, that led us to just recently have to let go of a lot of people.
wow. Just because of the cash flow
Yeah,
and the burn rate and so forth,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
Mm,
So it was high 5-digit USD burn rate, like net burn. a month, and
Wow.
we just had to let the people go. Like great talent, and none of their fault as well.
Sure.
But at the same time, how do we maintain that customer base, right? Let alone MRR growth,
Right.
right? But that's purely on a finance basis. And how do we migrate away customers that are on pure unit economics for us? So that's all like numbers decisions. And
Right.
then obviously the mental toll on a lot of people, morale,
Sure.
it's just it's just collateral damage.
Right.
And as a CEO, you take full responsibility for that,
Mm.
and that sucks.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
not a fun time.
no.
Yeah. So how do you kind of from this experience kind of stabilize the team, increase motivation or morale? Like what are sort of like the things that you kind of pulled as like levers to kind of maintain it, if not, increase it?
I think it's just be like genuine and real
Right.
with the team. And what
Right.
I mean by that is, I think there's this thing I learned a few years ago where you make decisions like Captain Spock from
Okay.
Star Trek, but you deliver it like Mother Teresa.
Okay.
So I've been, it's just like something like, oh, that's interesting, and I've just been adopting that philosophy
Right.
when it comes to these kind of periods.
Right. Right. So be
It's
very logical
yeah,
in your sort of at least a construct of what you want to communicate, but then very empathetic in the
yeah,
way that you deliver it. Right.
correct.
Right. Right.
And so that's the framework. But to colleagues, it's like, what is our mission? Are you happy here? Have we empowered you enough? And look at the value that you're offering to our customers, which stuck with us through this period,
Right.
even after we increased their prices.
Sure.
I mean, isn't that a testament to you and something?
Right.
So I think that empowered a lot of our colleagues,
Mm,
and it's not empty words. It's the actions through our customers' commitment to us, and
right.
vice versa.
Right.
Which
It's tough. It's tough. It's a tough story. And then like as far as but financial performance has improved, right? I mean it's gone
yeah,
up,
yeah,
right? So
we broke even on the P&L for the past 2 months,
right.
fluctuating here and there, but at least it's not burning high five digits per
Yeah.
month.
Right. Right.
Because I don't
So
even know where to get the fundraise for that kind of cash in this environment,
oh,
right?
absolutely.
So it's survival mode, and what is absolutely necessary, as to survive.
Right.
And I wrote on LinkedIn yesterday. I think this is like a massive detox for the company.
Sure.
And as a human, when you detox, you lose muscle mass and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Become
Right.
leaner,
Yeah.
and you're more agile. You get into calisthenics, and
Right. Right.
same kind of analogy here.
Right. Right. And then so yeah, I mean what other things did you have to actually I mean you looked at the head count and those things. I mean what else did you kind of what other measures would like an entrepreneur kind of look at in this type of survival mode?
Um, Literally, it was looking I mean, the cash every single day, what
Right.
goes in and what goes in, and in terms of collectibles, the receivables, make sure you get them on time.
Sure.
What can be delayed going out? How do you reduce your liabilities? So this is like very CFO kind of mindset. Just, I
Right.
mean, in terms of, you also got to plan what's next. And I
Right.
think that's the hardest part, because when you're in that survival mode and you're trying to think what's next, more longer term, it, it's a complete, left and right. It's
Right.
a big mental block.
Right.
How can you think long term strategy whilst you're survival moding every day?
Mm. Right.
So
Right.
I'm still trying to get through that, mental barrier, but you have to for the longevity of the company.
Right.
And then I think what's next is kind of like, hey, we got X hundred of customers at the moment. How can we get to double this? And based on everything that we've learned before on acquisition methods, what worked and what hasn't, what can we do again?
Right.
And
Yeah,
then
so I
yeah,
mean basically you not only pivoted out as far as like the product and propositions, right? You were talking about okay, leveraging big data to go and do credit scoring, but then you pulled back from that. What? How did you pivot in terms of the go-to market, right?
correct. We didn't really try anything new. We tried double down on what really worked for us.
Right.
The stuff where it was negative ROI in terms of acquisition cost,
Yep.
or it was just poor customer quality,
Hmm.
and we would just say, no, we're not renewing, we're not doing any of that anymore. And I rather have slower growth at the moment, but not give us surprises at this
Mhm.
point, because we can't afford it.
Right, right. And the quality, when you talk about that, is like, is that just because they're asking for a lot of customization, or like, what are the
Elements of the quality here for us.
right?
Yeah, I would say customization is one thing. Second thing, it really comes down to the founder or the CFO fit.
What does that
What I
mean? Is
mean
like,
by that is sometimes, especially a lot of SMEs, not Fortune 50s, but SMEs, the culture of that SME, and same for the startup, comes from the founder
mm,
itself. And whether that founder, in a most simple way, is a micromanager or macro manager or knows how to delegate, there's no right or wrong. It's just sometimes working with a service provider, if you're very micromanaging, it's very hard to work with.
right.
And especially with the morale situation our internal
Mm,
staff are dealing with, it's a problem we don't really need to have.
right, right.
So I
It's
think it's it's not as simple as like just filling in an RFP and you win the bid kind of thing. I think it's like, you see them every week as the accountant to the
right.
customer. So that's something we have to take into account.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, all those folks. They, well, I mean, you're in the accounting business. There's got to be a lot of micromanagers, but
Yeah,
that's an interesting, because yeah, you basically are, I guess, in the have the benefit of picking and choosing who you work with, right? At this
absolutely.
point, right? Because the more trouble that they offer to you and your staff, and it just kind of demoralizes them, right? And you don't need that right now, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Cool. And then so you kind of look at the current market situation, and where do you see light at the end of the tunnel for this thing? Or I mean, not for your business, but I mean just the overall macro situation. What's your read on this right now for you in the context of your business?
In the context of our business, yes, I definitely see light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
I think for what we achieved at this stage, at the seed stage, it's really only the Hong Kong market, which accounts for like 85% of our revenue.
Right.
And the other 15% is the light at the end of the tunnel for me, which means customers in other countries that need
And you're
this.
doing like Southeast Asia, or
Yes,
you're okay, good.
yes. Southeast Asia, some in the US,
Right.
wherever they adopt cloud bookkeeping.
Mm,
And it's homogeneous. And in a way, and where the US, the buying pattern is very different than the customers buying in Asia.
mm,
What I mean by that is in the US, which I kind of prefer for our business model, is they would choose a partner for bookkeeping, they would choose a partner for tax, they would choose, specific function with that partner. But in Asia, it's like you have to do the model where you have to do a full service,
right. Oh,
all,
you
all in
do.
one,
You
all in
need
one.
to.
You need to.
Okay.
And that's where we might or might not pivot in that way. Because I realize if you're so niche in the bookkeeping space like we are, you're kind of constricting yourself
Hmm.
to the buying pattern here.
Right.
And we're more, I think, suited for the US in that sense,
Mm,
where they're more particular with each niche.
right.
So that's a consideration, but that to me is like an opportunity, definitely. And light in the end of the tunnel, it's just survive through this cycle. I mean, we went through ZERP, we can see Carter and all these platforms and the numbers. And as much as I don't like looking at those numbers, the reality is just going to survive this period, whatever it takes.
Right.
And as you said, Neil, like that equity story, it doesn't change. It's
Yes.
just when you execute on it.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think it's got a fantastic growth opportunity. It's just timing, market timing. And well, nobody can guess, but I mean, yeah, like you said, a lot of things are in terms of survivability and so forth. So, I mean, do you see yourself kind of pushing a little bit more into, going into more, let's say, U.S. or Southeast Asia markets with the product? Actually, how do those folks find you? Because you're based in Hong Kong. Like, how do they actually? How have you kind of acquired those clients?
sure. So the U.S. clients, most of those clients are actually fractional CFOs.
Okay.
So
Right.
we made a few blog posts here and there with some backlinks,
Yep.
tried the whole Reddit approach, some
Yeah.
growth hacking through Twitter, leave comments, and that was the initial start.
Right.
Because that
Okay.
the audience loves that stuff.
Right. Right.
And interestingly, I mentioned this example earlier. It's kind of like these fractional CFOs are serving these funds, AUM around 50, 100 million, and the fund administrator does a great job at the compliance, quarterly reporting, but we're essentially the bookkeeper for these kind of sort of funds. And it's like interesting market. I wouldn't say like, hey, that's the market we're going to double down on, but
Right.
that's what we got so far
Right.
organically.
Right.
And then for SEA, however, that would be for our next round of fundraising to, you know, expand on that market and try to replicate the same playbook that we have built in Hong Kong through the accounting firms, etc.
Right.
But essentially the same thing. It's just more like it's not doing. We don't do any paid ads. It's more like, hey, just target a few accounting firms that have a very digital native approach. Try it out. Let me know some feedback, and
Right.
it's that kind of approach.
Right. Interesting. So yeah, I mean, it's almost like social media marketing to get these types of accountants or fractional CFOs to get on board.
Yeah,
So, and then
correct.
you maybe just kind of deploy it inside of the U.S. or do it, down in Singapore or other places like that, right? So,
Yeah.
so when you look at the sort of like the competitive landscape, I mean, there's some pretty big players inside of this space. Like, how do you differentiate against some of these other folks, right?
So
I
you
won't say the name, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
usually when someone asks me that question, I think the blue ocean is really there.
Yep.
And in terms of if we go to a customer, of those three segments, usually only one segment, which is the digital native segment, have heard of the other competitors.
Mm,
And in terms of competitors really deep in our bookkeeping space, there isn't really any in Asia. But even if there is, that's a validation to me
right,
that hey, there's someone else operating this market trying to solve this problem, which is great for the space.
right, right,
And I would say the not competitors, but I would say more partners would be the digital native players, but they offer the full service in Asia. There's two or three of them here, and two big ones in the US. I think there's enough space for everyone. Because
right.
if I go, and for those living in Hong Kong, I go to Tuen Mun tomorrow, go to a factory building, and just do a survey of, have you heard of any of us? The chances are 0%.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
because the space is still very occupied by a lot of traditional players, and accounting firms are a lot of legacy businesses.
Mm.
So it's about how to incorporate yourself in that ecosystem.
Do you see that bringing these types of accountants, like the digital transformation of those accountants, like you said, is that part of what you guys also do, or people just come in and say, I just want to troubleshoot and use this software and figure it out myself? Do you have like sales teams or
Yes.
training teams or something like that?
Yeah, we have CS team to do this, and um, I, I would say in Hong Kong specifically, it's very low percentage that wants to self-service, click on the question mark toggle and figure out themselves.
Right.
Usually it's like, walk me through this.
Yes.
Oh, and then actually, I don't really want to use the software. Can we just outsource the whole thing to you?
Oh wow.
Which means, why don't you white label to us? And
Right.
and the, and that goes back to just the nature of a lot of Asian-based accounting
So
firms.
they just completely outsource it to you, and then you basically load the data, like,
Sure,
right, right, do
sure,
the OCRs and
sure.
all that stuff,
And
right?
their customers don't even know about our existence. It's a win-win
Wow.
in that situation.
Right, right.
And we've also done the experiments when you talk about digital transformation. There are a lot of accounting firms looking to exit. And let's just say the partner's retiring in their 60s,
Sure.
the second generation doesn't want to take over. And we thought about this. Do we do an aggregator play of fundraising to acquire these accounting firms
Right.
and improve the margins on it?
Yep.
And more like a PE play.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting conversation.
Right.
So I think in terms of, you know, big size accounting firms, though that's not our target at the moment. I think it has to be like a what's that thing? Product led growth strategy for these
Sure.
accounting firms, one by one.
Right. That's wild. So yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like a very, very specific niche right now. I mean, and of course, it's growing and it's got a lot of opportunities. Now, where do you see? Yeah, I mean, I guess where do you see this going? I mean, you have a lot of different options, like we were talking about earlier, right? I mean, um, where do you see yourself developing, whether it's in terms of the product, whether it's the tech, whether it's even geographic? Like, what sort of direction are you looking at?
Hmm. Um, I think in terms of the product, we really need to increase the. In the end of the day, it's about the accuracy of the data extraction. And as we sort of scan more invoices from different worlds, different countries in different languages, different formats, that's a lot of training to be done. Like whether it's fine tuning or whatever. And how do we leverage on the GPTs as well as the local data that we already have? I think that's very, very important because that is what defines our unit economics
Mm,
for the business. Because I don't think it's very smart to just keep hiring bookkeepers, to fuel the revenue, to
right,
support the revenue, because that defeats the thesis
right,
of why we're doing this in the first place.
right,
So I would say geo expansion for sure, but the product enhancement is the future, and there's enough space there. And I mean, apart from the data play that we talked about, there's enough work to be done
right.
just in that territory.
And then, so how much? I guess if you kind of look at the roadmap specifically for the AI portion, is like, what other areas are you thinking about that could potentially be leveraging AI to, execute a lot of the
Sure.
automation?
I think more from a chatbot perspective, because if you imagine right now when you deal with your accountant on a monthly basis or an annual basis, you send in a bunch of documents. They sometimes cannot match that transaction to your bank statement because I'll give you a very specific example. Sometimes if you haven't paid an invoice for 3 months and then you send in a check, that's the total amount of 3 months worth of invoices. You can't really automate that. That's a human clarification required.
Right,
Oh yes, I've actually sent in this check to pay for these three invoices.
right. Yeah. So how would you?
So that's where I think the last step, whether hey everyone moves to AirWallex or Reap, and they're for credit card usage, and everyone moves to Stripe, and I mean that's the most beautiful world, right?
Mm,
But that journey, it's going to take a long time, especially in this part of the world.
right,
So in that sense, okay, let's kind of admit that you know not everyone's going to be an early adopter and use these tech stacks, especially in the businesses that we're talking about earlier.
mm,
But at the same time, we're utilizing a lot of our human labor to interact with these customers. Where does a chatbot come in? Do they understand the nature of that business, the customer, etc.? I think it is a human business after all. So
hmm.
I think to answer your question, it's the chatbot part.
Chatbot will be the sort of like the next phase of the development, right?
Yes,
Right.
correct.
And then, I guess as far as the use of the AI, it's like, how have you seen that type of use case before inside of any other, like, not necessarily inside of accounting, but inside of other institutions that might be something that you could learn from, or
Yeah, I there's recently been a company in Silicon Valley called Puzzle.
puzzle?
Yeah,
Okay,
Puzzle. They just raised 35 million US,
okay,
a very big round,
right,
and it is, I would say, the most advanced accounting software for SMEs in the world at the moment, fully automated with AI.
right,
So everything you can think of from literally like the onboarding flow, the way you interact with the accounting software, it's I would say it's a gold standard.
right,
And I mean, we reference of like what they're building. Hey, it makes a lot of sense, and they
sure,
actually executed on it. So good
right,
for them. But I mean, apart from the accounting space, I, just on Twitter all the time, right? I mean, you have a lot of the indie hackers, or not necessarily the guys working at OpenAI, but like people just building off it. As you know, with the GPT, people are just building their own GPTs now,
yeah,
and it was just interesting to see how the bots that they create,
yeah,
and you just take a bit of piece of information from here and there and try to apply it to your business.
and try to create something new, right?
Yeah.
Is there any sort of uniqueness between, let's say, the U.S. or Southeast Asia versus Hong Kong in terms of the accounting or any of the accounting practices that make it more unique than others?
If you're talking about purely from a bookkeeping level to generate the
Mm,
P&L and balance sheet, no. Right?
right.
Cash basis, accrual basis, IFRS, US GAAP.
Yeah.
But because of the tax laws in each country, like for example, we tried in Indonesia, and then we realized, hey, there's a country tax, there's a state tax, there's a village tax, and
Wow.
then you have different set of books for accustoming to each tax regime. And I think it's that makes the bookkeeping life tough, because in the end of the day, there's so many changes to be made. It's never like static,
Right.
right? Some customers are like, yo, I need 3 sets of books, one for the lending application, one for this, one for that. And I think in the US we see it a lot more standardized, and I just think it's just part of the development there. I think it's just a lot more mature.
Mm.
But in Southeast Asia, we do see these instances, and it makes closing the books a lot harder, I would say.
More
More,
difficult.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit more
It's
challenging.
nuanced. It's
Yeah,
very nuanced.
very nuanced stuff. So, I guess what other key learnings you would take as far as your entrepreneurial journey up until now? I mean, what would you kind of top three, top five kind of recommendations for different founders or people that are inside of their businesses that are, maybe struggling or kind of going through the
Yeah.
same experience that you've been going through, right? So
Number one is share your struggle.
share it,
Yeah.
like tell people,
Yeah.
or
Tell it.
like
It's
for mental health or
I think for mental health,
right,
yeah, definitely for I can only speak for myself here. Just helped letting it out.
right,
If you're and it might not fit everyone's personality. I'm
right.
just not very like, hey, keep his face like, hey, it's going well, it's going
Everything is
well,
fantastic.
and you're just gonna build it up inside you,
Yep.
and then you're just gonna make irrational decisions for the company,
Mm,
and it's just not worth it.
right,
So there's enough forums out there on Twitter, people going through the same thing, let alone face to face, you know. And I know it's not the best topics to talk about during networking sessions. So
right,
choose the right forum to express this.
mm, right,
And you might not get empathy from everyone, and but you will from one or two, and then, and that's all you need, really.
right.
So I think that's the first thing. Second thing is, don't mind the noise around you in the end of the day. And you can get distracted from, oh, this guy raising this much on TechCrunch. Oh,
Oh,
they built this first. If you're working in a space where the best is you're defining your new category, if you're in a space where, kind of like us in a blue ocean, there's a lot of people not adopting this, tech stack yet. There's enough time. Just don't like overstress it.
right,
There's enough capital in the world. Just I guess that comes down to the optimism at the end of the day. And number three, it's yeah, don't let go of the people that join your company, in the first year, the first joiners, I would say.
mm,
They might not be the best at executing this and that, but they could have been anywhere else, but they believed in your mission at the start.
right,
And I would say, even for myself, I might not be the best person to lead the company from 10 to 50, but I did it from day one to day 10.
right,
And there might be a better person to take my spot for the company's in the company's best interest. And that the same goes for your initial team. But at least everyone had a little part to play in this whole journey.
right,
So I think that kind of puts things into perspective.
right.
Yeah.
Cool. Hey, Haywood, thanks a lot for coming into the show. Really appreciate it. Thanks for all the different insights and your learning and really telling us how it is. I mean, being very honest and open and authentic about it. Super interesting. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks.